Hello and welcome to the Shifting the Paradigm webinar series, where we build community knowledge, skills, confidence and understanding of child sexual exploitation. We hope that you find this webinar beneficial.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you Project Paradigm for everything you're doing, and for anyone listening, because I'm not sure who has come, but I just wanted to thank you for all the work you're doing, and to let you know that this seminar and webinar is for you, and thank you. So let me start by saying that this picture really sums up my hope that you leave with today, is that we're all in this together. And this is a painting that won a prize, was done by a 13-year-old in Slovenia, picked out of 600,000 different submissions. And I think this really speaks to the heart of the conversation we're having today. It's a difficult conversation, but I don't think unless we continue to have these conversations, anything's going to change. And so when you leave today, just understand that my aim is to be uplifting and empowering in the conversation, and but we're going to be touching on topics that maybe are stressful. And so I don't like to think that I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know your situation. I don't know what you're dealing with, but I do know that I need to let you know that some of the beginning parts of the slides are going to be quite stressful, because I feel like unless you understand the science of what I learned in 30 years, then nothing will change. But at the same time, this could be triggering without you realizing it. It could be stressful. So please consider listening to this webinar with a professional or other understanding friends if there's anything I say that you can't handle right now. Remember, it's designed specifically for educational purposes only and for your comfort. I know that you have the flexibility to mute or turn off the video if you don't like it. But the webinar is being recorded. You can view it at any time and with someone else or a professional, and at your own pace. And I just have to put these numbers there for you just in case you need to call somebody. So I'm going to be discussing three things in three parts. The first part is going to be describing what are the advances in neuroscience and genomics that demonstrate the impact of adverse early life experiences on brain and child development. The second part is, what do we do? How do we end child sexual abuse? We start by breaking the silence. We start by sitting in these difficult discomfort conversations in our society so that we can reduce its impact on future children, brain health, and stop it going across the generations. The last part, I'm going to focus on neuroplasticity, and that is the remarkable capacity of the brain, one, to handle things that it doesn't like. Secondly, its ability to change anytime with accessing certain tools and technologies that we didn't have before. I want you to leave, because what I understand about the brain really likes to hold on to negative, stressful, and traumatic ideas and topics first. It likes to hold on to them, and doesn't like to think that there's all of these positive, uplifting things. So when you leave today, I started with the slide of we're all in this together. Everything is better together. Everything heals together. Yes, I'll show you things you can do on your own to access the neuroplasticity of the brain. But because I have to focus in the first part on the science that led me to the last two parts, I just don't want your brain to just hold on to that part first. So just know that the bottom line of this presentation is to be empowering, uplifting, and access neuroplasticity. Sexual abuse is common, and that's part of the issue, is that we bury our head in the sand in Australia around these topics. These are the data from 8,500 people that was published last year. And I'm sure people on this webinar understand this data, so I'm not going to focus on it. We will leave you with notes and resources afterwards if you want to access it. But it's common. 28.5% of people in Australia have experienced sexual abuse. When we look at a survey of 3,500 young people between the ages of 16 and 24, child sexual abuse in Australia in those ages is 25.7%. 1 in 4 Australians have experienced that before the age of 18, and girls experience this at 2.5 times the rate. So there's a lot of gender disparity. 1 in 7 boys have experienced child sexual abuse. So let's talk about some of the facts you're probably aware of, but I just want to highlight that, and why it matters for this presentation is that perpetrators are very well known to victims and survivors. This doesn't just happen in other countries, it's happening locally and are all around us. Perpetrators generally tend to be men. The difference in 2024 compared to previous years is that there's an exponential explosion in online child exploitation and sextortion and other things that parents and caretakers bury their head in the sand about, and only 3% of parents think it's going to be their children. And this is leading to a massive opportunity for the dark web to target Australian children because of our wealth and access to very unsafe technology. And that's something I'll only touch on briefly. So this is Internet Watch Foundation report from 2024. And the most alarming thing, and why I wrote my book Being Seen and came out strongly this year to create forums and books around this topic, is because it's the age of the children is getting so young, and the lack of information out there about the total lack of safety online for children is astounding to me. This data demonstrates that children ages 3 to 6 years of age are being coerced into terrible acts online because people are pretending to be children from around the world, and we don't like to talk about this topic. It's allowing this massive, big, open, wide gap of opportunity for predators to target large numbers of children. I'm just going to share this video with you, just from shared by, I put together a series of little videos to highlight what's actually in reality happening to children in 2024, that many people out there want us to feel like that's not happening in Australia, or that there are mixed messages about the impact of social media and smartphones on our children.
I've been a child therapist for well over 12 years, but the kinds of children that are ended up in my therapy office are nothing like I've ever seen before. When I tell people about the kinds of things that I'm seeing on a regular basis, they laugh, they don't believe me, or they go into shock. I'm seeing children under 10, talking about extreme sexual behaviours. I've got young boys telling me how they're abusing their bodies, desperate to get ripped like the fitness influencers. I've spent my career specialising in online harms and technology, so maybe I just see a certain type of child. But I'm inundated with the same issues over and over again. Children being sextorted, groomed, cyberbullying, struggling with body issues. And yet, when I talk to the children, 90% of the time, they don't tell their parents what's happening. There's something big happening beneath the surface. We're about to see an avalanche of many more children struggling with the issues I see in the office.
Your children will likely see adult content online. You aren't going to stop it, but what you can do is either ignore this uncomfortable fact or do something to mitigate the damage. And here's some uncomfortable facts that makes many parents stick their head in the sand. If you're thinking, but not my child, a report from 2019 found that even though 75% of parents thought their child had not yet seen this naughty content, over 50% of these same parents' children had seen when asked. And the reason you can't control this from happening is that most of these children find it accidentally on social media. It might pop up on social media feeds like Snapchat, or a friend shares it with them. So it's likely going to happen.
I just got my hands on screenshots from a test Snapchat account, and you're going to want to see this. In June of last year, an attorney set up a test account on Snapchat. She used a brand new cell phone with a new phone number, and she identified as a 16-year-old female. She did not allow Snapchat to access any of her contacts. There weren't any loaded on the test phone anyways. Snapchat then prompted her to connect with 200 people she may know, also called the quick add feature. I'm about to show you the users that Snapchat was recommending to a 16-year-old girl. Okay, so we have Pimp Ash. We have Re Big Fine Ass. We have emojis for money, alcohol, and pills. We have Demonic God. Sexy Zach. There's BNWO, which stands for Black New World Order and is a fetish term. There's Send for Dick, Girl on Girl Buyer, Add If You Send, referencing nude photos, Thick Dick, Add Me for Fun, and I Trade and Send. Despite Snapchat saying that these were people she may know, she did not know. So once the 16-year-old female test account was set up on Snapchat, she decided to add a couple people who Snapchat recommended to her. She clicked add on a few accounts, starting from the top of Snapchat's recommendations. Very quickly, the private messages started coming in. Messages saying, would you be interested in free nudes or trades? A message saying, can I send you a dick pic? To which she did not respond, though he proceeded to send multiple photos of male genitalia. A message saying, contest, youngest, cutest girls to send sexy pics get $50 in a Cash App deposit. Underage may join. As a reminder, this was a Snapchat test account set up on a brand new phone with no connection to any contacts, self-identifying as a 16-year-old girl.
So let's talk about the neuroscience. So there's a deep neuroscience that's being unraveled right now and published as to why is there a delay in time to disclose. 66% do not disclose during childhood, 25% when they reach adulthood. And then for those who do disclose, it takes 24 years from the time of the abuse. Older children who disclose will frequently not do so to their peers, and this is the paper here. So we must stop believing the lie that young children will not be impacted by what happens in early childhood. I'm a very lucky person because I have a podcast called the Thriving Minds Podcast. I get to interview experts all around the world that are dealing in different aspects of this. And this quote sat with me for a really long time, and I like to use it because we don't like having these conversations, because that's what I learned after 30 years of studying the brain, why my sister got schizophrenia, all had to do with the combination of genetics plus early childhood experiences that added up over time to create mental illness. And we don't like to talk about it because it's family secrets and shame that we never like to talk about. I would say childhood sexual abuse is probably the highest one that no one, except for people like yourself working in the spaces, understand how impactful it is for people across their lifetime. So when we look at these beautiful new babies, we just love them, don't we? We know that early life experiences shape the brain and mental health. We know that as soon as these babies are born, and how they interact in that environment shapes who they become later in life. Early life experiences shape brain architecture. We now have scientific proof of how adverse childhood experiences, including our community environments, impact the neurological networks inside the brain. I like using this tree because trees remind me a lot of how the brain is formed. It's very similar architecturally. If you look underneath trees and how they communicate, or mushrooms or anything else, plants, you'll find a neural network underneath there that has the same kind of activity that we have inside our brain. As we've formed over millions of years of evolution, we've always accessed the most important features that allowed our survival. So here's the thing. Early life experiences, both good and bad, shape who we become. We don't start as a blank slate. But the problem is that with adversity and trauma, it leads an indelible memory inside the networks that lead to beautiful things that are adaptive to allow our survival, but then become quite maladaptive later in life. And then they show up in features in how people look or behave that we judge as being less than, which leads to most of the issues that we're facing in our society today. We are not born a blank slate. Everything that came before us shaped us. So where do we come from? We now know. We have unequivocal evidence because of the breakthroughs in technology such as genomics and DNA sequencing technology This is my family history when I spat in a tube in 2012 and had my whole genome sequenced for $199 in the US. As more and more people have done this, I've now learned that I came from the Fraser clan in Scotland, and I'm 50% Scottish. I had no idea. I thought I had no relatives or any people that I knew. Turns out I'm related to half of Queensland, and had no idea. This technology demonstrates very clearly where we came from, and it's over a really long period of time, millions and millions of years. Therefore, what we now know also is that we inherit memories of previous generations and impacts. And probably the best example of this would be Holocaust survivors, where it's been demonstrated that even if they weren't part of the Holocaust, the impact of the Holocaust on, say, their grandparents leads to an impact on the way their brain's wired, whether it's for anxiety or stress or any other label that you want to call it. And this is called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. And the data is becoming clearer and clearer that some of this, we see it in all species, it just hasn't been shown clearly in humans yet, that the microRNAs may be shaping some of the memories that we hold in our synaptic parts of our brain, in the circuits of our brain. And so we're acting on these memories without us even being consciously aware of them. So early life experiences shape the networks. We have brain imaging technology. We can show what stress does to the brain. So if we take the right-hand picture where you see this amazing blood flow up here in the prefrontal cortical area, when we're under stress, that blood flow starts to go away, meaning that it's taken offline. Our ability to make rational decisions and other things goes away under stress and anxiety and pressure. And you feel that, at the end of the day, when we're seeking donuts, for example, to handle our stress. These networks, we go between these different states. So I don't want you to go away and think that this is, you either have blood flow in the top part of your brain or you don't. But what we do know, if you look at this red on the left-hand side, this red image here, this tight image in the subconscious part of the brain, which is no longer subconscious because I can show it to you. And that's another furphy there, is that we think that we don't know about the autonomic nervous system. Well, we do, and we can measure it and we can change it with the right tools and technology. So adversity leads to changes in these neural circuitries. One, because it needs to be adaptive to handle the trauma that's happening as a child that you can't do anything about, so that it allows your survival. So the brain's main feature is survival. It's really good at it, and it sets up a lot of the nervous system that interacts between the brain and the body to allow us to survive no matter what's happening to us. The brain does not fully develop in this top part of the human brain up here where we make our decisions and all of these other things. That does not fully develop until the ages of around 25 in males and 22 in females. And that's what this image is demonstrating to you here. That really matters, right? Because if trauma and stress have impacted the way the brain's developing, some people may not have fully matured brains ever. And I think you can see that acting out on television a lot. When I see some people, how they act out, it's very clear to me that they had very traumatized childhoods, and their brain has never fully formed to be able to handle their ability to be empathetic, for example. So I'm not going to go into too much of the detail. I'm sure you've been given a lot of trauma-informed lectures about how adverse childhood experiences impacts brain development to affect cognition and all that, the foundational skills that allow us to be successful in this current Western world that we have created. I'm just going to highlight some things that I think are really important. The number of ACEs, or the number of childhood traumas you've experienced, have been well quantified by Dr. Andrew Fletty. I had the honor of interviewing Dr. Ander on my podcast. The episode is number 114, and he describes in detail how they set up this study and the profound results that they came to shift the whole field of mental health, but it's still not caught up in practice. This graph here on the x-axis shows what happens when the number of ACEs you experience. Some people get very lucky and have none, although some things aren't measured. I would like to make an argument that all of us have experienced different things in our life. So we have ACEs of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5+. In this particular set of papers that are published, it doesn't go beyond 10, but the study was set up in categories of up to 50. But when they made the publication, they had to reduce it down to categories of 10. So I just want to put that out there. As you can see very clearly, and there's a large number of these graphs, but I picked just a few of them that I think represent some of the front lines of the work you may be dealing with, because domestic violence is a very big issue in Australia. And you can see that the number of adverse childhood experiences that you've had determine your risk of becoming a victim of domestic violence, having early teen sexual behaviors, and also drug abuse and addiction. The adverse childhood experiences studies have made it very clear, combined with neuroimaging, to demonstrate that substance abuse, alcoholism, gambling, pornography, you name it, we all have something, workaholism, is a direct correlation to the number of adverse childhood experiences we have had in our lifetime, but also our parents and their parents, etc., back in time in history. And it's the way the brain adapts to adversity to cope. It copes by seeking other chemicals that will alleviate the impact from too much stress and trauma on the brain. And what's the best and fastest way of doing that? Drugs, alcohol, pornography, exercise, eating, etc. We all have something that handles things that we've never been taught about how to handle in other ways. So I just want to say that I like to think of addiction as a medication for trauma and stress. And this can be quite controversial because I started out as an addiction neuroscientist, and I was developing drugs for addiction for a good 20 years. That was what my lab did in America. And I really firmly believed that I was on the right path until I recognized through the studies of Andrew and Fletty and many others that I was completely wrong. And I think this is something to, as we process this idea, it's really hard to get your head around in the beginning, but I cannot develop a drug for a drug, if you know what I mean. I have to tackle the root causes, which is how to reduce and prevent adverse childhood experiences. We know certainly through work in my own research lab and many other labs around the world that toxic stress, there's different types of stress. There's great stress that gets you to do an exam or do your driving test or sign a mortgage document or all sorts of stressful things that we have to do. That's called eustress. That's stress that's allowing our life to head towards something that's allows us to be part of society. Toxic stress is the stress that started even before we were born in the neural networks of our brain, whether we were born to someone that was already using drugs, someone experiencing domestic violence, someone, I can go on and on. There's many, many factors here that impact the way the brain neural networks are developing inside. And we see that now. And we weren't able to do this until very recently in history. Although now that I'm saying that in 2024, I feel like I can't say that anymore because we've known now about this for at least 20 years. And I think that's enough time to say, we know that this is important and let's do something about it. So childhood trauma has wide-ranging impacts that go across everything in life, starting out as the simplest thing of brain development, moving forward to, therefore, we expect children to sit in class and do the same thing as someone's coming from a loving home that doesn't have any impact from trauma. It goes on, and it's an inflection that becomes exponentially worse with time. The most unfortunate thing that's still happening is that when people are presenting to you with a mental health problem, it's 2 decades from when it started. And that disconnect in time from early childhood experiences to an diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and in my case, my sister's case, schizophrenia, it's like treating someone that's had 5 heart attacks. And then we expect them to just get on with life. And I think this is the thing that has to fundamentally change if we want to make a change in all of the spaces that we work in. So the new research that's coming out too, because of our capacity to do brain imaging studies and all sorts of other things, shows why people take a long time to disclose, because the brain's not fully formed until 25. And you'll see this a lot where people only start to tell what's happened to them when their brain's ready to handle it. Because the brain learnt amazing strategies, especially the younger a child is where they're being abused, the more likely is that the brain will set up a system which will cause amnesia, meaning that it will prevent those memories from being remembered. So the brain's incredibly strong and powerful, and it has all these amazing capacities to keep us surviving despite the situations that we're finding ourselves in that were nothing to do with our choices. So for physical and sexual abuse, the earlier the age of onset is correlated with much greater levels of amnesia, and that's happening because of the top-down control from the ventromedial prefrontal cortex back to the amygdala. So the amygdala is actually highly inhibited in the numb state. And I think this is a really important piece of work. It's also, in some cases, for some people, dissociative identity disorder is also well known to be related to childhood trauma, but specifically sexual abuse of children. And the brain's so clever that if you're of a certain genetic likelihood of where you can visually image things or you can have great imagination in these moments when something's happening to you, especially young children, they learn how to dissociate into these different places that allow them to not be experiencing what's happening to them. And then later in life, they get a DID diagnosis, etc. But we now know a lot about why that is happening. And that's a whole other topic. So part 2, I want to break the silence to end child sexual abuse so we can reduce its impact on children and families. And the way we do that is by having these really hard conversations and talking about it. Can we stop talking about making children resilient? They are resilient. Can we create a world that is less traumatic for our children by becoming more empathetic to ourselves, more forgiving of ourselves, and recognizing that this is happening to everybody all the time, but we don't talk about it. That's why families are struggling and why they can't put food on the table, why they are taking drugs over looking after their children. It's because of what's happened to them in the past. So I follow and interviewed Jeremy Indica on my podcast, which I've got the links here. And he has been breaking the silence in the UK for about 5 years or more now. And I interviewed him on my podcast. I'm just going to share you this little story here. He has lots of social media handles and runs lots of conversations in schools and everything because he wants to break the cycle. Everything that we keep in silence stays in silence. And the first step is to break the silence.
We were best friends. He would look after me while my parents were at work. We'd play video games and kick the football around together. But in between all of this, he would take me to my room where the sexual abuse would happen. I didn't really understand what it was. I knew I didn't like it, but he was my friend and I knew that he liked it, so I would do it for him. We would do it so much that it became normal for me. I had no way of understanding how wrong it really was and that I should tell somebody about it. I was 8 years old, growing up in the early 90s. There was no education about these things in those days, and no conversations being had with children about them either. And the problem is, I still don't think there are conversations being had with children about these things. And this has to change. Children go many places where they are looked after by different adults. Sports clubs and other friends' houses being some examples. So when we cannot be by their side, they need tools and knowledge to understand if something is happening to them and that they can tell us. We have to do everything we can to give children a fighting chance of speaking out if something is happening to them. Because I can tell you something for sure, it becomes a very difficult life having had an experience like that. So please, let's have the conversations and make a change.
Jeremy's also made a film called Staying Silent, and I highly recommend. We'll send the link to you. I don't have time to show it to you today, but it's a brilliant short film. It's won many awards talking about this topic. The more we share this information, the more platforms we have where people have been abused come out and talk about it, the more normalized it becomes, and the less likely it is that people have access and can continue abusing children. I also interviewed Feather Berkauer here. She's an expert, been studying this for 35 years and works with families and children. And she's written books called Off Limits and these conversation starter cards, because the hardest thing in this area that I find is people don't like talking about it because it's so sickening to your mind that you shut down. And as soon as we raise these topics, people already shut down. They just, especially people that aren't on the front lines or aren't learning about it or educated in this space. And this is what provides the perfect opportunity for perpetrators to gain access to children, because we refuse to believe it's happening here. She's written a book called Off Limits, and she talks about this on my podcast, strategies we can use for building prevention teams. Prevention teams are teams that surround children. As soon as you do that, you've already created and reduced the likelihood that anyone can access your children, because they know kids will tell people there are no secrets in my home. And so here's an example, for example, that she talks about, say a teacher or someone like that says, let's make up a dance and keep it our special secret. The secret part is really the beginning part of the grooming exercise. Let's not tell your mum or anyone else about our dance. But we don't keep secrets in our family. What do you mean you don't keep secrets? I'm not allowed to keep secrets from my mum. I tell her everything. And she's been doing this work since 1985. She is an expert in how to prevent child sex abuse and help parents and caretakers have conversation cards and practice inside their mind for how to interview people that might be babysitters or coaches and teachers, so that everyone understands that that family keeps no secrets and that grooming cannot happen here. So as we turn to the last part of my presentation, I want to talk about, so obviously in an ideal Pollyanna world, we would be talking about this conversation. We would be preventing child abuse, and that would be wonderful. I would love to see the end of adverse childhood experiences in our society happen. But I'm also a realist and know that many people, if there's 28% of our population being impacted by child abuse, we've got a lot of work to do to heal from that impact as well. And I'm just going to spend the last part of the presentation discussing all the ways we can do that together and individually, and how to keep having these conversations and keep pushing it through all avenues, whether it's police, child protection, youth justice, in homes, in schools, and in our community, because our children are our future. And we have to come together as a community around this topic. The first place to start is yourself, because without looking after ourselves, we can't look after anyone else. And in this particular area, I can't think of a bigger deal than taking care of our own brain health. These topics are really stressful and impact us because we're empaths. We don't want to see people harmed. So that then harms us. So we have to become very strong in understanding that we have to take care of ourselves first, because we can't take care of anyone else. The brain's very plastic, as I alluded to. It's really wonderful at protecting us during childhood when things aren't going as we would like them to go necessarily. But then that set of strategies and behaviors we learnt become maladaptive later in life, especially as the memories and the brain's ready to be able to handle and remember what happened. We need strategies in place to be able to overcome stress. And that's by having really great, strong, quality connections, learning how to be seen, and the lifestyle choices that help to amplify and make that easier. So when we talk about neuroplasticity, we understand it really well for young children, don't we? Kids sit up really quickly from the age of 0 to 3. Their neural networks are really active. And then over time, as we get older, that neuroplasticity starts to drop off. However, it doesn't mean it's over. Even though our brain starts to fully form by the age of 25, we can still access neuroplasticity. It's just that the amount of effort it requires to make those changes or do something different requires a lot of discomfort and pain, because the stuff that got wired in when we were young takes much longer and harder to change as we get older. But I'm here to tell you, as a neuroscientist who's tried it and done it myself and really understands it deeply, you can do this for your whole life. There are many people in their 80s that went on to become, sprinters and triathletes and fencers and all sorts of other things. We can access this beautiful part of the brain for healing. I'm not saying it's easy, and it's much better if we do it together than if we do it on our own. Now, this is what happens. Why, if we have this capacity inside us, no matter what has ever happened to us, because we are strong and resilient, because you're listening to this webinar, we're surviving 200 million years of evolution. Why is it that we think that we're stuck and that we can't make a change, or that we can't access this amazing capacity inside the brain? Well, it's because we have to lean into pain and discomfort. We have to do things differently, and we have to change how we think. And that's not easy, is it? Brain resilience is a learnt strategy. It's a skill set. It's a brain mechanism. Just as you get an L when you're learning to drive, and then a P plate, P1, and a P2 as you do 200 hours of practice. Brain resilience is exactly the same thing. Brain resilience exists in the spaces that you can't see on a brain image, because you have to activate new synapses to create new pathways. And what we tend to do is we get new information, or we see an influencer, or we see something that's being fed to us in our recommender systems on a diet or exercise or something like that. We get very intensely focused on that and want to make the change, because everyone does. Unfortunately, when we go to this high level of intensity of what we want to do, we fail to be able to maintain the consistency, and then eventually we give up, which is this gray set of graphs here. How do we get to neuroplasticity or brain resilience or activating the positive neurochemicals in our brain? Is we have to focus on the tiniest little thing and replicate it daily until it becomes a new automatic habit in the brain. And there's a system in the brain that allows that. There's a part of the brain called the striatum. When you're learning to drive, you're setting up an action sequence of events inside your brain. But once you've learnt to drive, that sequence then gets sent to another part of the brain to become automatic. So you're not thinking every day when you're driving where to put your hands and where to put your feet. You just drive, don't you? It's the same for brain resilience. We have to start small and build up with intensity over time. It's a consistency of doing one thing every day until it becomes automatic. If people have been through a lot of trauma or stress, they cannot do or access neuroplasticity in exactly the same way as someone that hasn't had the same level of trauma and stress. And this is the piece that continually is missing in what I see happening in rehabilitation centers or other places. We look at everyone and try and apply the same prescription. But when you start to understand neuroscience and neuroplasticity, you know that those billions of circuits and trillions of synapses have all been created differently, which creates a different individual. That's why ACEs science demonstrates very clearly that by understanding the ACE score gives you not a label, but an educational understanding that the kind of ability for brain resilience requires more community support and more and less number of activities to do over a longer period of time. We are a social species. We're born to be together. Everything in our society is trying to separate us. From the minute we're born, parents are worried about their kids, whether they're going to get A's on their report cards, whether they're going to fit into a social group. That is a natural parental instinct for us to belong. However, our technology and all of the structures in our society are making us separate.
The one thing that I've come to learn as a neuroscientist, we need to feel like we belong for our survival. There's a whole machinery, a lot of the brain dedicated just for social, what we call social cognition. That is all of the different pieces that are needed for us to interact with people, to understand people, to read emotions, and all of these other things. So that part of the brain is incredibly important. We're built for connection because it's very important for our survival.
How far back do you think the genetic evolution goes?
So this is such a great question, Joey.
Oh, thank you.
So it goes way back before humans. So our need to be part of a social group, you can even go back and look at birds that are flying together. You know, birds of a feather flock together.
Yep.
And why is that? Because that ability to stay together keeps you safe. So the more you're surrounded by other people, the more resources you have to protect yourself from predators.
Yep.
So that's how old it is. These circuits are so old, so they go way back beyond even our own human species. What do you think has happened to make people feel more anxious now? Our separation from that village or that tribe feeling as we've become more disconnected in a way.
So when I talk about how to access neuroplasticity, it's so much better if we do this in community and together than if we try and nut it out on our own. Yes, we can do all of those things, whether it's nutrition, exercise, sleep, and all of these other things you hear all the time that you could be doing. But how do you feel when you're with someone else that's truly seeing you, listening to you? How do you feel? You feel so much better. It's 10x one walking on your own in the park.
The one thing that I've
And I can't emphasize this enough. It's the new neuroscience. It's the neuroscience of 2+. For the first time in history, I got to interview Joy Hirsch on my podcast from Yale, who spent COVID setting up techniques that allow us to measure interbrain synchrony. And that's what this slide is showing you, that you can access flow, you can meditate and sit on your own and get into a flow state and recognize that your thoughts aren't your thoughts and everything else that you're learning in those spaces. But in community and together, you're accessing a completely different part of your brain that you cannot access alone. We are a social species. 50% of our brain is designed to be together. If we want to make a change in our world, we need to come together and help each other. Incidental kindness in the community is the thing that makes the community safer and more secure. The more we head towards an American model of individualism, the more likely it is that as you're seeing, domestic violence is increasing, it's not decreasing, despite a million resources we're throwing at it. We need to start to think about how we are kind to each other. I can't emphasize that enough. Here are some resources you can read to illustrate this. A study that started in 1932 called the Harvard Grant Study demonstrated and looked for over 80 years. They followed men from 1930 all the way through till recently to ask the question, what makes people thrive? What gives them a high quality of life? And there were no women in Harvard at that time, so there were no women in the study. But over and over again, the results revealed, and the people running the study hated this. This results revealed it's the quality of our relationships that determine our longevity, our health, and our happiness. It's the quality of our relationships. The more disconnected we come from each other, the more unhealthy we will be. We are set up to need belonging and connection. And you see this all the time. When people come together, they feel so much better. I'm emphasizing that because what I'm about to tell you are the individual things you can do, but I'm always looking for shortcuts or simpler ways to help people get access to, health and longevity and thriving. And I keep coming back to the fact that we need to keep bringing us together in community as much as possible. We also need to update mental health practices, and I'm doing work in these spaces, trying to work with the medical professionals and others that are on the front lines of making diagnoses. The field is changing way too slowly to recognize that childhood maltreatment is a critical factor in psychiatric diagnoses, treatment, prevention, and education. I have started some work with doctors here in Queensland and others to start integrating this understanding into their practice, but it's way too slow than I would like to see, especially as I'm getting older as well. But I hope that you will also understand that childhood maltreatment is the root cause of mental illness and one of the leading factors. And unless we start to hit that root cause, we will continue to do and pass this on through the generations. I would like to see an end to childhood maltreatment before I die. I'm not sure that's possible, but at least if we could reduce it, we will reduce the incidences of mental health and illness. I don't have time to show this slide. I've shown it many times before, but it's just a demonstration of how far back these old circuits go and why childhood maltreatment causes mental illness. If you're wanting to do something straight away for yourself and feel anxious to be with other people, or don't have someone that can support you, here are a few small things that will make a big difference. One of them is to activate a panoramic view in the morning. And what I mean by that is you're using your visual neuroscience system or your visual eyes, which go back to the back of your brain, and they naturally turn down your stress system in the midbrain and brainstem. And what that means is instead of looking at your phone in the morning is to look out the window and take in a really wide panoramic view, because what you're doing is you're setting up your brain for the day to reduce the amount of stress that's coming into your brain. The second thing is at the end of a warm shower, you can turn the shower to cold, and it's starting to activate some of the blood vessels and nerves that are activating your blood vessels to naturally tap into neuroplasticity. The third thing is to turn to less processed food and more raw, natural food, whether it's fruits, nuts, or vegetables, and reducing the amount of ultra-processed food in your diet, which is activating the stress parts of your brain and microbiome and many other things. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I think the number one thing we can do is to reach out to other people. And if you have a wide circle of friends, count yourself lucky. If you see someone that doesn't, please reach out to them, email, text, or any other way. Social connections is something that need to be trained. 50% of the brain is social cognition. And it's the number one thing that makes us happier, even if we don't want to believe it. We are a tribe and a community of people, and it's been well known for centuries that that's the ultimate thing that we need for thriving is through connection. I'm running a forum in Brisbane on August the 8th because of the issue around exploitation online in children, and bringing together a lot of people we currently have nearly 300 people registered. It's a community event. I want to create a forum like from centuries ago. We have a big issue in our country, and we don't want to talk about it because we're told technology is our future. But for children, there are younger and younger children on phones, accessing social media. AI-enabled chatbots are getting to children through games and many other places, and we need to have this conversation. It's really difficult for parents. It's happening in homes. It's not, and schools are struggling with kids that are coming to school tired and wired. As a society, it's our future. And if we don't do something to allow people to understand that this is the biggest public health crisis that our country's faced for a long time, then we will just let it happen. Tech companies have basically gaslit the world into believing that that's our future. And if you go anywhere in a park or a street, you will see 9-month-old babies on phones. And I understand from a brain development perspective, this causes stress in their brain because their brain's not able to handle it. They have not been evolved. They've evolved to be in physical face-to-face contact with their family and not online. I have a podcast where you can get access to information for free. I interview experts and all sorts of other fun people in the world that are leading the charge in all these different spaces. So you can update your knowledge and get to hear from the experts straight into your ear if you're out walking or in other places. So I believe the beautiful part of technology allows us to access this information for free. I think partly I have this podcast. I just want to let you know that where I came to in my 30-year journey, my sister ended up taking her life from her illness. I didn't have access to this information around neuroplasticity and brain health at that point in 2006. My research was underdone by that point, and I was in the wrong track. It took me 20 years of developing drugs for me to switch my mindset towards ACEs and neuroplasticity and healing. And that wasn't until 2010. So it's a long time. I started my journey in 1989. So I understand why it's so hard to make these changes. If it took me 3 years studying the brain, 3 years before I believed in adverse childhood experiences and neuroplasticity, and I was working in the space of the brain for a long time, I can understand why it's really hard to have this conversation or to process the information. I can see that. It is kind of difficult, and especially when you work out it's in your own family history. I think that's the hardest part for me, was seeing the answer I searched for became the answer that I didn't want to get. But I think the change will come, and it's coming, compared to my parents' generation and their generation, where they weren't even allowed to talk about mental health. We can make brain health become everyone's business, because it is. We all have a brain. We all are struggling in different ways. And the more that you access and understand that you can become the boss of your brain, the brain is incredibly beautiful and plastic, and it's and most beautiful, empowering tool that you have access to, the greater the change that we will see in society.
Thank you for attending this webinar. Please feel free to share our resources and let us know if you have any feedback. If you would like to learn more about our program, visit projectparadigm.com.au and be sure to tune in to the next webinar.